96.9 Boston Talks, Hank Morse on Radio Row, where I had a chance to speak with Jon Voight, legendary Academy Award-winning actor, one-time Vietnam War protester, and now Tea Party favorite.
Voight joined us. Thank you, Mr. Voight, for joining us here on 96.9 Boston Talks.
It's my pleasure to be with you.
A lot of excitement here.
Yes.
And
this is great. You know, people don't know what this is, but we're in a place where there's rows of booths, and people are, coming in and out. I just saw Newt Gingrich back there, and we just got a lot of folks milling around, and I was here, and and you grabbed me, and it's a wonderful kind of a way to do this thing.
Well, thank you. I doing a little bit of research, and I read that you were a Jack Kennedy Democrat who had worked on the McGovern campaign at one time, getting signatures, I believe, and anti-war protester at one time.
Yep. And
suddenly, these years later, you're a Mitt Romney supporter.
Right.
How do you go from point A to point B over time?
Well, listen, first of all, I want to say a couple of things about that. First of all, I went through the 60s. I got caught up in the hysteria of the 60s. 60s was a very damaging, dangerous kind of era to be growing up. We had this, it was sex, love, and rock and roll, that kind of thing. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Or E, all of the above.
Yeah, everything. And it was not a good time, really. It was a very confused time. And it was a time of the Vietnam War, and then it was a time of drafting. And a lot of people didn't want to go to the war, and they went to Canada. Myself, I went in the reserves, and I watched the mailbox, every day for 6 years until I was cleared of that responsibility. But so I wasn't really, I wanted to be an actor at that time, and I went to classes in New York, and I had finally found what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to go to war. Now, part of that, I knew that my buddies were going, people I knew were going, and I knew that it was war, and war is hell. And they were going through hell. They were doing it for our country, and they were doing it for South Vietnam, and they were doing it against a communist onslaught. Now, all these years later, I can see a lot of the different aspects of that. Why we get caught up, the information I got, which was propaganda from certain, folks, and I know that the people in the streets thought they were doing the right thing too.
Contrast that with the appreciation we have for the men and women serving our country, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan, in the recent conflict, where during the Vietnam War, people would yell and spit at these fine young men and women who were coming back and doing the job that the American government asked. And now we celebrate these people. Talk about the difference a little bit.
Okay. One thing was, first of all, while I was caught up, and I was very concerned about the guys who were out there, and I did make friendships with the fellows coming back. And that's probably what turned me finally. One of the things that turned me was when I saw the end of the war come, and then we didn't honor our promises to the South Vietnamese people in 1985, and the communists came across the border. We were supposed to defend them if that happened. We didn't even send them bullets. We didn't back them up in any way, and it was a slaughter. A couple of million people, 2.5 million people were killed, slaughtered in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. That was the beginning. And the left, who had made this thing happen by their demonstrations in the streets, turned their backs on it, on all this pain and misery and slaughter, and just walked away. That's what the beginning was for me. But it didn't happen overnight because I was programmed at that point. Now, many years later, I saw this happening again after the Gulf War, and I wanted to make sure the troops were not treated the same way. So I became on the other side. And I have to say, it was the Vietnam vets who made it their responsibility to go and meet those planes coming back and make sure they welcomed the guys and make sure that the same treatment did not happen to these new young people. And then I've been part of it, going to be with the troops. And Gary Sinise now out in California has been tremendous in reviving the interest of the entertainment community and the troops, and he's been very successful. So it's a turnaround. And I look back from this vantage point and say that's one thing that has improved. We have taken care of the troops. We're looking at the troops continuously. We do appreciate them as a nation.
Well, doing some research, I found that you definitely have red, white, and blue patriotism running through your blood. You've been embraced by the Tea Party. In January, I know you endorsed Mitt Romney. What was it that caused you to A, get in line with the Tea Party, and B, what was it that caused you to endorse Mitt Romney, and why Mitt Romney?
Well, I think the first part, the Tea Party happened because it was truly a grassroots movement. We saw the country out of line. You know, we saw it being tarnished. We saw it being put into debt. We saw fiscal irresponsibility. We saw government imposing itself everywhere. And we wanted to stop it. I say we because I think, you know, half the country was of the same mind. We saw this thing happening, and somebody said, we got to do something about it, folks. And all of a sudden, people were standing up and going to these town hall meetings and expressing themselves. Well, it was a marvelous...
Not unlike protesters in the 60s.
Yes, but in this way, this was on the more positive side of things. And of course, it was for the totally different reason. This was out of patriotism.
But what I meant by that comparison, they were willing to put themselves out there,
yes,
for a cause they believed in.
That's exactly right. And a lot of those folks were people who maybe had seen a lot of that stuff and, like myself, had turned around. But they were responsible people. The Tea Party has gotten a very bad name. And anything that happens that's against this particular administration and this group that's in power now, the leftist movement in the country, they denigrate them, they try to demonize them, and they call them names. Well, they've distorted everything about the Tea Party. The Tea Party are just the normal, you know, salt of the earth people of America. They're the people who pay their taxes, who are responsible, who raise families. They're the best of us, really. And those are the people who have said, hey, we got to get out there and we got to do what we can to stop what's going on.